the floor.
Thank you very much for your very kind invitation and your kind words. As someone who only left England 4 hours ago, I realise how much anxiety I gave our host this evening, because all the train connections had to work, but they did work. So I'm very glad to be here, and thank you for coming out. So I'm going to talk to you today about Etruscan. And really one of the things that always interested me about linguistics and ancient language and language studies was the idea of decipherment, was the idea of using linguistics as a tool to be able to read things and learn about things which we wouldn't know about otherwise. Now, most of the decipherments, the famous decipherments from the ancient world, are cases where you have something written in an unknown script. So if you think like Egyptian hieroglyphs, and that's cracked normally with the aid of a bilingual inscription, like the Rosetta Stone for Egyptian hieroglyphs, and also through knowing a language related to the language which you're trying to work out. So in the case of ancient Egyptian, we knew about Coptic, the last stage of ancient Egyptian. We could understand Coptic, and so that helped with the decipherment and reading of ancient Egyptian. With Etruscan, it's a very different story, because here it's a language which we can read quite easily. It's written in the Greek alphabet, but it's not related to any known language. So we try and work out what the language means just by looking at the text. And as we'll see, there are a few bilingual inscriptions, but mostly very short and not very helpful. So how do we go about finding out what this language means and reading the Etruscan text? And there are about, roughly around 10,000 surviving Etruscan texts. And we can now read about 95% of them with confidence. So the other 5% are more difficult. So I'll say something about that. Firstly, the Etruscans were people who lived in pretty much what is now modern Tuscany in northern Italy, and left fantastic records of their civilization from about the 7th century, 8th, 7th century BC, till around the 2nd, 1st century BC, when the Romans gradually conquered most of Italy, and the Etruscan civilization was in decline. From the ancient world, we have some of our best paintings, wall paintings, from Etruscan tombs. So this one is from a tomb in Tarquinia. We have lots of funerary remains of the Etruscans. So this is a large sarcophagus, a large stone coffin. And this is a lid to it. Mostly they would burn their dead and store the ash in little, well, in this area of Volterra, they would store their ash in little alabaster urns like this one. And this is another Etruscan funerary arrangement. What you'll notice from these last two images is that they feature women, and Etruscan society is quite interesting, differently from Greek and Roman society, in that women seem to play a much more prominent role. I'll say something more about that later, but they seem to have a different attitude towards the role of women in society than the Greeks and the Romans. Now, they also have other artworks like statuettes. This is a statuette with an inscription on the leg. And, as you're getting the idea now, is there one thing which is noticeable about Etruscan society is how much they wrote down. So how many of the objects surviving have got writing on them. So even something like a jug, a plain wine jug or water jug, has got a kind of long inscription here, painted in yellow on it. It's what they sometimes say in ancient studies. The Etruscans had the epigraphic habit. They had the habit of leaving inscriptions, leaving written remains. Some of their objects surviving are really quite unusual. So this one, some people may recognize this and know what it is. If you don't know what it is, what do you think it is? What's your guess of what it is? Anyone like to guess what it might be? It has got writing in. It's actually quite small. It fits in your hand like this. It would be quite a good map because it looks to have mountains, but it's not a map. Any other guesses? Anyone actually know what it is? Yeah. It's a liver. Yeah, it's a model of a liver, an internal organ. And it was apparently used by priests and soothsayers. One of the ways in which they would tell the future is by looking at the inner organs of animals, particularly the liver, and where the blemishes are on the liver. This will mean various things, and this is a kind of, it's like a map for the priest to find out, what bit of the liver means anything. And apparently, I don't really know much about livers, apart from Etruscan livers, but apparently if you rip out your liver, you do have these kind of lobes on them, these what look like mountains on your liver. That's how you can work out what this is. So this is an Etruscan liver. And here's from an Etruscan back of a mirror. They would paint the backs of their mirrors or carve into them. This is a depiction of a soothsayer actually looking at a mirror. So there he's, sorry, not a mirror, a liver in his hand. There he is trying to work out the liver. He happens to have a couple of wings, but we're not interested in that for the moment. If we actually, the liver, if we copy out the whole inscriptions on the liver, that's what it looks like. It's covered in writing. One thing just to point out about this now, you'll see round the rim, round the edge here. Does this work? Yeah. There are what's been numbered 1 to 16. And actually on the liver you have these different segments there. We now know enough about Etruscan to know that these are God's names written in here. One fascinating discovery, an incredibly clever discovery found about this liver, is that these God's names correspond to a later Roman author, writing probably 700 years after this liver was made. His divisions of the sky into 16 areas, and 16 areas dedicated to different gods. And these seem to correspond to the gods mentioned on the liver. So the names have changed to the Roman god names rather than the Etruscan god names. And this is because, so if you saw lightning in the sky was divided up into 16 areas, and you could tell which god was involved from the flash of lightning. So it seems to be that if you learnt the order of the gods which are significant on a liver, it would also work for the order of the gods significant in the sky. And we'll see that that's actually relevant later. So another feature of Etruscan epigraphy, Etruscan inscriptions, is you often get them in the cities of the dead, the necropolis, so where they bury their dead people. Often they lay out the cities of the dead like a real city. Unlike the real cities, most of Etruscan real cities have been destroyed by now, but the cities of the dead have been preserved. And so here you have a street from Orvieto in a necropolis. And above each one of these tombs in the street, there is some writing. So that's some writing, presumably signifying the owner of the tomb. And of the other Etruscan survivals in writing, one of the most famous is a linen book, which was apparently taken by some Etruscan to Egypt. When he died in Egypt, they recycled the linen. They actually wrote on linen. They had books in an age before paper. They would write on linen. And they recycled this linen to map a mummy in. And then in the 19th century, a Croatian traveller, as you used to be able to do in the 19th century, bought the mummy, took it back to Zagreb, unwrapped it, and they found a bit stained, but there it is. It was actually covered in Etruscan writing. So we have this, surviving book from the ancient world. We don't have anything like this for Greek and Latin, which has got Etruscan written on it. So those are some of the sort of texts written in Etruscan. Just to say, where Etruscan was spoken. Etruscan was spoken mainly around Tuscany, but also in the Po Valley of Italy. They've also got wider extensions. Now, some of the basics of Etruscan, it's not an Indo-European language. So unlike Latin and Greek, it's not an Indo-European language. And indeed, it's not securely connected with any other known language, certainly any living language. There are about 10,000 of these inscriptions in Etruscan, most of them fairly short, most of them under 12 words long. There are around a dozen longer texts, so like that linen book, that's one of the longer texts we have, which was used to wrap the mummy. And it's attested over quite a long time period, so we've got these inscriptions from around 700 BCE to around, the latest is probably right at the beginning of the Christian era. Now, I said Etruscan was unrelated to any other language. That's not quite true, because there is something which looks very similar to Etruscan, attested on a very few inscriptions in the Greek island of Lemnos. And this is the longest and most famous. This inscription, which is there in the National Archaeology Museum in Athens, it's on display, you can see it. Next slide has got it so that you can actually see the writing, and this rather cheerful chap sitting there. Now, this is written not in the same alphabet as the Etruscan inscriptions, but the language is very, very close to the Etruscan language. And this is a debate, really. How come we find remnants of this language both in Italy and on the Greek island of Lemnos? There are various theories. People try and explain how these languages are connected and what the relationship is between them. Now, looking at the language, as I said, the alphabet of Etruscan inscriptions is borrowed from Greek. So we can read Etruscan quite easily if we can read Greek. And in turn, the Latin alphabet was adopted from the Etruscan alphabet. So the transmission of the alphabet we use, although the Romans also had a sideways glance at Greek whilst adopting the Etruscan alphabet, but some features of the Latin alphabet can only be explained if you understand an Etruscan intermediary. It's normally in Etruscan inscriptions it runs from right to left rather than left to right. And the Etruscan alphabet doesn't normally use the signs for voiced consonants, so B or D, and it doesn't use the vowel sign O. Now, I said it doesn't use the signs for voiced consonants. It does use the Greek gamma, the third letter of the Greek alphabet, but it uses that for the unvoiced sound k. And in fact, in early Etruscan inscriptions, they have three different ways of writing unvoiced velar stops with a C, a K, or a Q, depending on the vowel following. And this is why the Roman letter, the third letter of the Roman alphabet, is unvoiced, represents an unvoiced sound rather than a voiced sound, because they borrowed it from the Etruscans. Because through the Etruscans, Etruscans presumably in their language didn't have voiced stops, they didn't have a voice in contrast. So that's how the alphabet kind of changes from Greek to Latin. The Romans later had to reinvent the letter G. Now, it does use some of the other Greek letters of the alphabet. It does use aspirated stop signs in the Greek alphabet, so the PH, TH, KH. It uses the Greek digamma W sound for what's normally transcribed in Etruscan as a V. And Greek alphabets, early Greek alphabets, had two signs for S, for sibilants. Etruscan uses both of them. The second one is often called san, and it looks something like a capital M. And it's normally transcribed with the Greek sigma. So in my transcriptions of Etruscan text, you'll see some things with the normal S and some things with the Greek sigma. Where you see a Greek sigma, that's pronounced as sh. They also invent a new letter which looks like an 8, which has for the sound f. Going back to our soothsayer, we see there's a little inscription here, and you can read that quite easily. We can read that as Kalkas. So that's how we transcribe it. It's the name of this mythological figure. Okay, so we can read Etruscan. We've got lots of these inscriptions. How do we actually interpret it? How do we work out the language which is going on? Well, there are two basic approaches. One which is recommended, one which is not recommended. I'm going to start with the not recommended approach, which is the etymological approach. And basically, the etymological approach goes something like this. You decide in advance, or because you feel like it, or because you think there are some words which look familiar, that Etruscan is related to another language, language X. You have this hunch, then you look for vocabulary in language X, which could be similar to Etruscan, and you match other vocabulary as much as you can to Etruscan, and then you've proved it, and then you publish your book, and you say Etruscan is really related to, and choose whichever language you want. People have often tried this with Basque, people have tried it with Finnish. I just took randomly, really, someone who tried this with Tajik, an Italian scholar who came across the Tajik language and decided that Etruscan was related to Tajik. And it's quite convincing here, because he says, well, here are some words, 4 words in Etruscan, 4 words in Tajik. Me means I. Man in Tajik is the first person pronoun. That's okay, they both begin with M. The word for son in Etruscan, we're fairly confident, is clan. Well, Tajik doesn't have a word for son, which is clan. They have a word for daughter-in-law, which is Kelly, and it's kind of like a son, a daughter. It's someone who marries your son, so it might be related. Etruscan numbers we know quite well. So the number for 10 is sa. Well, there's a word which is a hand, sa. 2 hands is 10. Yeah, it proves. Etruscan nak might mean because, inak means so, ril means something like at the time of, or age of, and re means at or on, so therefore it's proved. You can do that with pretty much any language you choose, so that's why I don't recommend this etymological approach. So more successful has been the combinatorial approach, which is basically you treat Etruscan like an enormous crossword puzzle. So you have 10,000 inscriptions, and you try and say, well, what would be the meaning of this word which would work in all the inscriptions that occurs in? Or what would be the meaning of this morphological ending or suffix which would work in all the occasions it turns up? So you have no assumptions about what the language, about the meanings of the language or the grammar. You work it all out in context. And you also have a second assumption that when you have a text on a pot or a text on a gravestone, it's going to be saying the same sort of things that other texts in other languages from the ancient Mediterranean would be saying. So, often texts on pots or gravestones gives the names of the owners. So you actually, you say, well, let's say, this is the same sort of text as you find in contemporary Greek inscriptions. Then, so we had that word ril. Well, often in grave markers, and we'll see an example of this soon, you have someone's name, and then you have a number, and you have ril before the number, and the guess is that the number is the age at which the person died. So ril means something like aged, or the age at time of death. Now, in addition to this, we have kind of to check that we're not going completely mad in doing this. We have a few bilingual inscriptions, the most famous, and some of the most famous inscriptions from the ancient world are here and here, and the so-called Pirgi bilinguals, which were a stunning discovery in the early 1960s. These 3 gold leaves, amazingly surviving, pretty much intact. They've got holes around the edge because they would originally have been nailed onto wooden boards. And these gold leaves have one text here which is written in Phoenician, a language which we can read and understand, and then 2 texts written in Etruscan. So this is the longest bilingual inscription we have with Phoenician and Etruscan. The problem is we've got 2 texts and 1 text only in Phoenician, and the 2 Etruscan texts seem to be different ways of saying the same thing as the Phoenician. So they're not a word-by-word exact translation. They seem to be giving the same message, but they actually express it in different ways. I had a seminar once with a Phoenician expert, it's looking at the Etruscan and the Phoenician of these texts. The Phoenician experts, I said, well, we have no idea what the Etruscan bit means here. What does the Phoenician bit mean? And they said, oh, we were hoping you would tell us from the Etruscan, because we have no idea what the Phoenician means here. So there are some difficulties with that. There are also a dozen or so Latin Etruscan bilinguals. So this is one of the most splendid. This is a large gravestone from Pesaro, ancient Pisaurum, which has got Latin in huge letters at the top, and then underneath, going from right to left, Etruscan. And we can read the Latin, we can read the Etruscan. So, the Latin says Lucius Cafatius, son of Lucius, of the tribe. This stet is just a Latin abbreviation for what tribe he belongs to. And then it says his haruspex and fulguriator. Now, haruspex is someone who does that business of looking at livers that we just did, so an inspector of livers. And he's also an interpreter of lightning. That fits in with what we saw with the Etruscan liver, that if you'd learnt where the gods are on your liver, you also know where they are in the sky, so you can also do lightning. So you can do 2 jobs at once with just 1 set of knowledge. Now, so we've got the Etruscan has got his name here as well, Cafates. He's not called Lucius, but in Etruscan Laris, son of Laris. And then annoyingly in Etruscan, you've got 2 words in Latin, you've got 3 words in Etruscan. And that's a problem with a lot of these bilinguals. So which we think Nechfis is actually the same as this haruspex. It turns up in other Etruscan inscriptions. But of these Trutnut Frontac, do they both mean together lightning inspector? Is one kind of meaning lightning and the other inspector? Or does one mean lightning inspector and one mean something else? So it's a problem working with these bilinguals. This is the example of this age of, I was talking about earlier, Aril here. You can see actually this is the woman's name, Larthi. Crackney, this is, she has in Roman terms what would be a praenomen. Roman women generally didn't have first names. So if Cicero's Cicero's family name was Tullius Cicero, and his daughter was just called Tullia. Cicero has a first name, Marcus, but Roman women generally didn't have praenomina, not in the first period or the Republican period. And Etruscan women did. And this is something which is interesting in the inscriptions in the epigraphic record. As people change the language from Etruscan language to Latin language, they're often reluctant, women are reluctant to give up their first names. And you can kind of imagine, you want to be known as something other than Mrs. Clackson or Miss Clackson, you actually would like to have a first name. So in the Etruscan society, there are various ways of actually, when they Romanize, of trying to keep pronomen. So another inscription we saw earlier. If we had time, I'd get you all to try and actually read this and read what it says, but I'm going to do that for you. Mi Laucusies Latinies. This is from one of these tombs in Etruria from around 600 BC in Orvieto, in the city of the dead. Now, we have lots and lots of inscriptions like this, often which start off with a mi, and the guess is that mi means I. It's a speaking inscription. It's as if the tomb itself is speaking. This is quite common in ancient Greek inscriptions as well, that you say, I belong to, I am of. And so here, we our first bit of Etruscan decipherment, we assume that mi means I, and see where it takes us. And it takes us that the second element is, as we'll see later, a case form. That looks like something what we'll call the genitive in Etruscan, is the name of the possessor. So this man's name was Lacusia, and his surname, or his family name, his nomen, was Latinia. And it's interesting that the guess is Latinia means the Latin. It means someone from the area of Latium, where which is the word which actually gives us our word Latin for the language of the Romans. And this is actually the first attestation of the word Latin in Italy is on Etruscan inscriptions. So we've started working out Etruscan grammar, and so let's carry on a bit and see what more we can do with working out Etruscan grammar using this combinatorial approach. So firstly, we've had, on that text, we had this inscription, Mi Laucusies Latinies. Another text, which we might have on a jug, would be something like Mi Velos Ramles. And we see the same pattern emerging here, that we've got a mi, which seems to be a pronoun, and something which we'll call the genitive case, elements which we can recognize as names in a case which we'll call the genitive case. And so these translate as something like, I belong to, I am of. You don't have the verb for to be or anything for belong to, you just say, I am of so-and-so. You get variations on this formula where you have more elements in. So here we've got mi velilias thina malakas. Now what we know of the genitive in Etruscan, this is in the genitive case, this is in the genitive case, but these don't seem to be in the genitive case. So you get mi plus a name in the genitive plus thina, which isn't a name, and then you get this element malakas. All the Etruscan texts with Athena written on them are pots or jugs. So our guess is that Athena is the word for a pot or a jug. And it's actually the jug speaking, it's saying, I am the jug of Velilia. This malakas, a very clever bit of research, someone compared other formulae from Italy and other languages. So in Greek and in also the ancient Italic language, Faliscan, you get similar formulas about where they're saying, I am the good jug of the good so-and-so, or I am the nice jug of the nice so-and-so. And this seems to be what this malakas is. It's something like an adjective in two different case forms. So I am a good jug of the good Velilia, or as I put, the lovely jug of the lovely Velilia. that's the first step. Now, if you look at more and more of these inscriptions, we've got 10,000 of them, so we've got quite a lot of variation. You see other patterns emerging. So another pattern emerging is the sort here, where you don't have the form just me, you have the form mini at the beginning. You have what we recognize as names, Mamaka, Venel, and these are first names, praenomen, like Latin Marcus, Marcus or Venelius, and then these are their family names. So these are not in the genitive case, these look to be what we might call the nominative case. And then you've got something in between. And the something in between is a word ending with ke. So, trying to think about, how are we going to tie in what's happening in the grammar with these cases and the grammar of the other cases we just saw. I guess we don't have to be too eccentric to think that mini might be connected to me in some way. And here if we've got something which is a kind of unmarked case form, that might be the subject, for example, and so mini might be encoding the object, so it might be an accusative. And that would mean the thing in between has to be a verb ending. So that's an ending of the verb telling you, and it seems to be a past tense ending of the verb. So that's again, these are all hypotheses which we check against all the surviving inscriptions. We check against and we try and see, is this consistent? Is this a consistent use of this thing? So normally that's the answer we come up with, that this is a kind of subject case. This is the accusative, if you like, of the pronoun. And this is a verb which would mean something like, from parallel text, in Greek and Latin, there's something like they gave me or they dedicated me, depending on what the object is. And then finally, there's one other kind of variation, which I'm going to talk to you about now, and that's where you get what looks to be the same element here, mulvanike, mulvanik, but you've got a different ending here. You've got che rather than a ke. And this is another verbal element which we know actually from a bilingual tomb inscription where someone's surname in Latin is Scribonius, meaning something like the scribe, and his surname in Etruscan is Ziku, which we guess means something to do with writing. So we think that this is a verb meaning something to do with writing, and you have me in the kind of subject case there, and then che at the end. So what's our guess for what are we going to interpret for che? Any views? It is a passive, yeah. It's, yeah. So the idea is, I was dedicated, or I was written. So now we're at a stage where we can, with that knowledge, we can actually start looking at some of the longer inscriptions and see, whether we can work out what's going on with them. This is one, I'll just show you the bigger example. This is from a tomb in Tarquinia where we saw that very nice painted tomb from the beginning. Often on the walls of tombs, they also paint inscriptions. So this is a painted inscription. As you see, it's quite a long inscription here. And transcribed, here it is. It's got quite a few different elements. Yeah, all this business is his name. We know quite a lot about his name. This is a number, and then you've got two elements here. Capua looks to be like the Roman name, and indeed the modern name for the town in southern Italy, Capua. And then you've got Tleche, Hannipaluscle. And in the middle of that Hannipal, that actually is the name of the Carthaginian name Hannibal. And if you remember, Hannibal, this comes from after the Punic Wars, when Hannibal invaded Italy, accompanied by elephants, which he took over the Alps. So here we seem to have three different verbs: svalke, merke, and tleche. So any guesses for what any of these mean? So it's on a tomb. Firstly, you've got a number, 106. And you've got the dead man's name, did something at the age of 106. And you've basically got two options. It's either he lived for 106 years, which would make him a very old person in the ancient world, or he died at the age of 106. And other contexts of things make us think that this verb actually means lived. And this looks to be the word for year. So he lived for 106 years. He did something at Capua, and he was somethinged. And we know that this ending here means something like with the people of Hannibal. And basically that's what we know about this inscription. We can do the grammar. Yeah, we say lived seems quite a good guess for the first verb. We don't really know what he did at Capua. We can have lots of guesses. You can write lots of stories about what he might have done at Capua. But we don't have enough other examples of this root mer to really know what that means. So we just have to leave that. He did something at Capua. And he was somethinged, with the ones of Hannibal. Yeah. Was enlisted, was recruited with the army of Hannibal, because Hannibal got, against the Romans. Lots of the local peoples of Italy had joined up. But, it's anybody's guess, really. We don't have enough to actually know what that tleche means there. But we've got quite a good idea about what the syntactic structure of the sentence is. Okay, so a bit of more about what we can tell about the Etruscan language, about the way the language works. Number is quite an interesting category in Etruscan. There seem to be three different endings which could be added onto a singular noun. So first we have a regular plural ending, which seems to be used solely for humans, as far as we can tell. And this is a plural in ar. So we had our word for son, clan, earlier. The plural of son is klenar, and that seems to be an obligatory plural. If you have a numeral 3, you have to write down this plural suffix. There's another sort of plural, shva, or in some cases chva. And that seems to be limited mainly for non-humans. And it's non-obligatory. So sometimes if you have a numeral like 106 years, we do actually get the form avil chva, but you don't have to put that there. So if you have the number expressed already, you don't actually have to use this numeral ending. Zusle, that comes up on this long linen book, the mummy wrapping, and we know what that text is talking about, and we know it's giving some regulations for sacrifice, and we know that they sacrifice these animals called zusles, but we don't actually know what they are. So we just say it's some sort of animal which you might sacrifice. So, it could be a piglet, it could be a sheep, Unlikely to be a tuna fish or a crocodile, but we just don't know. And then there's a third sort of number suffix, which is a collective suffix, which has the form thur. So here the Kushu family, the Kushu is a family name, and if you want to say something belonging to the Kushu family, you say Kushu thuras. This also shows something else about Etruscan, that basically the language is agglutinative. So basically suffixes, you have a separate suffix for number and a suffix for case, and you don't have that inflectional morphology like Latin or Greek. You have an agglutinative system more like Turkish. So we've mentioned something about case. Here's a little bit more on case. We've seen already that there's a bare case form which doesn't have any particular ending. So it has no ending, and we take that to be the nominative case, and except for pronouns, it's also the accusative case. So pronouns seem to mark the difference between nominative and accusative, but nouns don't seem to show that difference between nominative and accusative. So you don't have a different case morpheme for the accusative for most nouns. There's a case which was probably the one we saw. You know, we had that form Capue. That seems to be a form of the locative case. So we have the place name Capua. If you add an E on it, in later Etruscan you get monophthongization, so you get Capue, meaning in Capua. So if you just add the suffix E to the base form, you get the locative case, where something is. And sometimes you have these post positions. So the looks to be a post position which takes the locative. So spuri the, we reckon, means in the city. Spur is the word for city. Then the genitive case, well, we've already seen, this is a case we know most about because we see thousands of examples. Most of those inscriptions which we can read are grave inscriptions, and most of them are saying so-and-so, son of so-and-so. So we've got lots of examples of the genitive, because it's often with the word for son, or sometimes they don't even put the word for son, they just say so-and-so of so-and-so, so it could be son of so-and-so or daughter of so-and-so. So we know lots and lots of examples of the genitive. There seem to be two different endings for the genitive. There's one which is basically S, and there's one which is basically L. And the distribution to them is partly done by the phonological environment, and it's partly with the meaning of the term. So the L genitive, for female names, female surnames, they use the L genitive. So often in your grave inscription, you write down your father's first name and your mother's surname. So you take your father's surname, but you put also as part of your name element, you say your mother was from this family. So it's like these complicated Spanish names or whatever, where you're sharing the marriage alliance, showing what the family is by showing your mother's name. So the L genitive is for female surnames, and for male names ending in basically th or s. So Larth, very common Etruscan first name, has the ending Larthal. Laris has Larisal. And the S genitive is basically what you get for all other masculine names. So Aule, first name, Aules, Vel, Velus. So we've already seen quite a few of these S genitive endings. Now, there are two other cases which both seem to be formed on top of the genitive. So you actually add the ending S onto the genitive ending, and you make a new case form, which is often ls. So you have some things like laugh vowels. When it's added onto the s ending, the result's a bit more complicated, so I haven't put it on this table. And that's often called the ablative. You have it, sometimes when you have the name of the person who's been doing something, responsible for doing something, you use this case ending. We don't have enough examples of this ending really to know, what this ending is. And even more confusing is the pertinentive ending, as it's called, which has, again, it's added on to the ending of the S or L genitive. And it seems to have both dative and agentive functions. If you say, I gave this jug to someone, you use this ending. But also, it seems to be if this jug was given by someone, you use this ending. So not quite clear what the sense of that ending is. Okay, now, to finish up, I thought I'd give you, from what you've learnt, have some chance to see if you can translate an Etruscan inscription. Do you want a bit more help than that, or is that enough? I mean, do you want? I can give you a bit more help. That's probably not very, very helpful. So here I've given you kind of the vocabulary here, but using what you've learnt from both the noun endings and the verb endings, what we know. What do you make of this inscription? And and it tells us something else important about Etruscan grammar. So that's the second thing. Firstly, can you translate it? Secondly, what extra things have you learned? I don't have a prize for anyone who gets it right. Okay. How have people got somewhere? Any questions anyone needs to know before they go? I should have said actually that this little sign here is just because that's showing you where the lines are broken on the inscription. So that's owl left. So it just means that you're going over a line there. So it doesn't mean anything. Is anyone going to volunteer? Well, just translation for the first two lines. How about that? Yeah?
Laris and Ole, sons of Laris.
Very good. Laris and Aule, sons of Laris. Did everyone get that? Well done. You're all Etruscologists. Yeah? So, they don't have a word for and. They don't have an obligatory word for and. So you have Laris and Aule, sons of Laris. Do you want to carry on? You sounded as if you were...
Have or constructed.
Very good guess.
While living.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so, what new feature of Etruscan grammar have you learnt from that? Important new feature of Etruscan grammar.
There's no difference between plural and singular.
Very good, exactly right. So the verb here is the same as the singular. So there's no different dual or plural or anything like that. You have the same verbal ending. Kerechun, our guess is it means constructed or built or something like that. They built this tomb whilst they were alive. This bit is a bit more difficult, in fact, impossible, but anyone have any guess for any of this? The sanishva are some plural inanimate things. Yeah. And we've got the mother and the father, and that seems to be like in Latin you can have quack for both and. So here they're saying, and actually this ending k for and might even been a borrowing from a language like Latin. So you've got apak, atik, mother and father. Some sort of inanimate plural thing. And kesu, the guess is it means are lying here, or something like that. And so sanishva, some people say, well, that might mean the mother and father, or their bones, or their bodies are lying here. So now they've become inanimate. Their bones are in this tomb. And then what about the clouty thorasi, which is a very nice agglutinative ending. We've got Claudia as Claudius, the same as the family name. We haven't had the family names of these people yet. These are all first names, so Laris and Aule, and their father Laris. And so this is the family of the Claudii, and then the thur is that collective ending. So it's for the family, and then you have this pertinentive ending. You have the genitive ending as, and the pertinentive e. So Clauti thorasi. So for the Claudii family, for the whole family of the Claudii, they built this tomb. So yeah, now you know how to read Etruscan. So my work here is done. So. Yeah.
Is it possible that it was in the year 106, but not according to Christian calendar?
Well, if it is, I mean, it would be the only Etruscan inscription which has that. I mean, basically, people have, presumably no one was around to check how old he was. And you find this in a lot of kind of pre-modern societies, that anyone who's over a certain age, their age gets inflated to an enormous amount, because if they've just kind of outlived their generation, they can be anything. So, but it does seem unusual that he was 106. Yeah.
You mentioned a possible relationship between Etruscan and Lemnian.
Yeah.
What do you think about this theory about the Iranian language group, which has a great inscription and Lemnian and Etruscan inscription?
Well, I mean, you're right. I didn't mention the Raetic, but Raetic does look also as if it's related to Etruscan. I mean, basically, there are two competing theories of Etruscan. One is ancient authors, some ancient authors, such as Herodotus, say that the Etruscans originally came from Asia Minor, so they came from Anatolia. And so the Lemnian inscription feeds very nicely into that theory, and you say, oh, this is a remnant of Etruscans before they all migrated to Italy. But the problem with that is up in the Italian Alps, there's other group of about 200 or so inscriptions in a language called Raetic, which also seems to have some of the same verbal endings as Etruscan, so that looks like Etruscan. So it seems less likely that the Raetians also migrated all that way. That doesn't seem to make sense. So, I mean, the Lemnian inscriptions are very odd, and I don't know, it might be, early colonizations the other way from Italy to, yeah. I mean, I've never been that convinced by any of the linguistic evidence linking them to the Anatolian languages. There's not much to it. Yeah.
The Greek used letters for numerals.
Yeah.
With the little points, and why would the Etruscans use Latin? I mean, even 600 BC, Latin numerals.
Well, their numerals are.
So why would CI mean 3, for example? And
no, sorry.
BI?
CI, key, is actually the Etruscan word key, which means 3. So CI is not.
It's not a numeral.
It's not a numeral.
Oh, okay.
But the Etruscan, that inscription with 106 on, the Etruscans did have a numeral system, not like the Greek. I wonder whether we can find this. Here are the numerals. That's a sign for 100. That's a sign for 5, and that's a sign for 1. Okay. So basically, it's not that they borrowed the Latin numeral systems. The Romans borrowed the Etruscan numeral system. Okay. So that the word for sign for 5, the Romans invert it. They tip it the other way around. And since they read the numerals the other way right, from left to right, that makes sense that they tip it the other way around.
And did they mirror the letters themselves?
Yeah, so they mirror when they're going from right to left. So if you can see here, that's an E. So the letters, you can tell which way you're reading by which way the letters are pointing.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.